Who let the help sit at my table? Grab this cockroach before she touches the silverware.
I'm not staff, I'm a guest.
A guest in that dollar store rag? You reek of food stamp.
Chloe invited me.
Chloe collects charity cases. This is a wedding, not a soup kitchen.
I have every right to be here.
Your only right here is to grab a mop.
I'm not leaving.
Oh, yes, you are.
Victoria grabbed Danielle's dress at the shoulder and ripped it apart. Danielle stumbled. Bare shoulder hit cold air, hands shaking. But she stood right there.
Now crawl back to whatever hole you came from.
200 guests watched. Not one said a word. Then a man in a tailored black suit walked straight through the crowd. He stopped in front of Victoria. "That's my wife." And what happened next turned that wedding into front-page news. Let me take you back to the beginning. June 21st, the longest day of the year. And the sun was doing exactly what Napa Valley paid it to do, pouring golden light over a vineyard estate that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. White tents stretched across a rolling green lawn. String lights hung between old oak trees. Fresh roses lined every aisle. The kind of wedding where the flowers alone cost more than most people make in a year. 200 guests, a live string quartet, champagne towers on every table. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a statement. The Caldwell family was making sure everyone knew it. Now, somewhere in the parking lot, a silver Toyota Camry pulled in between a Porsche and a Range Rover. The valet looked at the car like it was lost. Danielle Adams stepped out. Simple black dress, no logos, no diamonds, no designer bag. Just a pair of modest heels and a quiet kind of elegance that didn't need a price tag to prove anything. The only piece of jewelry she wore was a wedding ring, but it wasn't on her finger. It hung on a thin gold chain around her neck, tucked under her dress, close to her heart, hidden from the world. That was Danielle. She never flaunted anything, never needed to. She walked through the vineyard entrance carrying a small gift bag. A few guests glanced at her. Some looked longer than they should have. She was one of the very few black faces in that crowd, and in a setting like this, that fact didn't go unnoticed. But Danielle wasn't here for them. She was here for one person. Chloe Bennett, the bride. Upstairs in the bridal suite, Chloe was standing in front of a mirror, fighting with her veil. Her hands were trembling. Her mascara was already on its second attempt. Danielle walked in and smiled. "Girl, if you cry before the ceremony, I'm taking the veil and wearing it myself." Chloe laughed through her tears. "You came. Of course I came. You think I'd miss this?" They held each other for a long moment. These two went way back. Oakland, 9th grade. Chloe's family had taken Danielle in during the roughest year of her life. No paperwork, no questions. Just an extra plate at the dinner table and a bed in Chloe's room. That kind of bond doesn't break. Not for distance, not for time, not for money. And definitely not for a last name like Caldwell. Danielle helped pin the veil in place, smoothed out the train, fixed a stray curl near Chloe's temple. "Elliot couldn't make the ceremony," Danielle said casually. "He's closing a deal in New York, but he's catching a flight right after. He'll be here for the reception." Chloe squeezed her hand. "As long as you're here, that's all I need." Danielle smiled, but something in her stomach was already tight. She'd seen the guest list. She knew who was downstairs. Victoria Caldwell, mother of the groom, queen of the Caldwell dynasty, and the kind of woman who treated every room like she owned it. Because most of the time, she did. Downstairs, Victoria was already in full form. She was snapping at the florist because the peonies were too pink. She was lecturing the catering manager about napkin folds. She cornered the wedding coordinator, Grace Sullivan, and said, "I want every table inspected before guests sit down. This is a Caldwell event, not a backyard barbecue." Grace nodded and kept her mouth shut. She'd learned that lesson early. Then Victoria spotted something. Through the window, she watched Danielle walk out of the bridal suite and down the staircase toward the garden. Victoria turned to a woman beside her. "Who is that?" "I think she's a friend of Chloe's." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Chloe's side of the guest list is going to be the death of me." She watched Danielle disappear into the crowd, took a slow sip of champagne, and said to no one in particular, "I'll handle it." The ceremony was minutes away. The vineyard was glowing. Everything looked perfect. But underneath all that beauty, something ugly was already moving. The ceremony was beautiful. Pastor Reynolds kept it warm and simple. Chloe cried through her vows. Tyler Caldwell, the groom, looked like a man who couldn't believe his luck. The string quartet played something soft and sweet as they kissed, and 200 guests rose to their feet clapping. Danielle sat in the third row on Chloe's side. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue and smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. But across the aisle, in the front row, Victoria wasn't watching the couple. She was watching Danielle. Her eyes tracked every move, every clap, every smile. Like a hawk watching something that didn't belong in its territory. She leaned over to the woman next to her. "Is that one of the servers sitting in the guest section?" The woman glanced over. "I think she's with the bride's party." Victoria's jaw tightened. She said nothing, but the look on her face said everything. The reception kicked off 30 minutes later under the main tent. White linen tables, crystal glasses, name cards in gold calligraphy. The Caldwell family spared no expense, and they made sure everyone could see it. Danielle was seated at table 6, a mixed table near the middle of the tent. Chloe's college friends, a couple from her yoga studio, and an older woman who used to babysit Chloe's niece. Normal people. Warm people. The kind of table where you laugh too loud and nobody cares. Danielle fit right in. She complimented someone's earrings. She made the older woman laugh with a story about Chloe in high school. She asked questions. She listened. Within 10 minutes, the whole table loved her. That's who Danielle was. She didn't need a title to light up a room. But across the tent, Victoria was watching again, and this time she was moving. She crossed the floor with a champagne glass in one hand and a smile so sharp it could cut glass. 2 women from her circle followed close behind like they always did. Victoria stopped at table 6. She didn't look at anyone else, just Danielle. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. The kind of sweet that makes your skin crawl. "I think there's been a seating mistake. The kitchen entrance is around the back." The table went quiet. Danielle looked up. "There's no mistake. I'm seated here." Victoria tilted her head. "Really? You're a guest?" "Yes. Chloe invited me." Victoria let that hang in the air for a moment. Her eyes moved down to Danielle's dress, then her shoes, then back up. Slowly, like she was appraising something at a yard sale. "Well," she said, loud enough for the next 2 tables to hear. "Chloe certainly has eclectic taste in friends." A few uncomfortable laughs from Victoria's circle. Nobody at table 6 was laughing. Victoria turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The damage was done. Everyone at that table felt it. That word, eclectic, didn't mean interesting. It meant, doesn't belong here. Danielle picked up her water glass, took a sip, set it down. Her hand was steady, but the woman next to her could see the muscles in her jaw flexing. She didn't say a word. 20 minutes later, the toasts began. Tyler's best man told a funny story about college. Chloe's maid of honor cried through a beautiful speech about friendship. The crowd laughed and clapped and raised their glasses. Then Victoria took the microphone. She stood at the head table like she owned the room, because in her mind she did. She smiled at the crowd. She thanked the guests. And then she started talking. "Marriage," she said, "is about legacy. It's about standards. It's about knowing who you are and where you come from." She paused. "The Caldwell family has always understood that. We've always known the value of keeping our circle refined." She looked directly at Chloe's side of the room when she said it. "My hope for Tyler and Chloe is that they build a life that reflects the values this family was built on. Values of class, of dignity, of knowing who belongs at your table." Danielle stared at her plate. The older woman beside her reached under the table and squeezed her hand. The toast ended. Applause. Victoria smiled like she'd just delivered a sermon. She walked back to her seat, champagne in hand, glowing with satisfaction. The reception moved into dinner service. Plates came out, wine was poured. The noise level rose. People started to relax. Danielle excused herself from the table. She needed air. She needed to unclench her jaw. She stood near the edge of the tent, close to the bar, watching the sunset bleed across the vineyard hills. For a moment, everything was calm. Then she felt something cold hit her chest. Red wine, splashing down the front of her black dress, soaking through the fabric, running down to her waist. She gasped and looked up. Victoria was standing right there. A server beside her was holding a now empty tray. The server's face was white with panic. "Oh," Victoria said. She pressed her hands to her chest in mock surprise. "How clumsy. I must have bumped him." She hadn't bumped him. The server knew it. Danielle knew it. Every person within 10 feet knew it. Victoria looked down at the wine stain spreading across Danielle's dress. She didn't bother hiding her smile. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I'm sure that dress was from a clearance rack anyway. A little wine might actually be an improvement." Laughter. Not from everyone, but enough. Victoria's circle, 3 or 4 voices, just loud enough to sting. Danielle stood there, red wine dripping from her chest to her hem. Her hands trembled at her sides. She could feel the cold liquid soaking through to her skin. She grabbed a napkin from the bar, dabbed the stain, didn't look up. "Accidents happen," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but if you looked closely, really closely, you could see her nostrils flare. You could see the vein in her neck pulse just a little faster. You could see the way her fingers pressed into that napkin, like she was holding on to her last thread of composure. Victoria leaned in close enough that only Danielle could hear. "That's right," she whispered. "Clean it up. That's what your kind does best." Then she walked away, back to her table, back to her champagne, back to her throne. Across the tent, Chloe caught a glimpse of Danielle standing alone by the bar, dabbing at her dress. She started to move toward her, but the photographer grabbed her arm. "We need you for the couple's shoot in the garden. 5 minutes." Chloe hesitated. She looked at Danielle, mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Danielle gave her a small nod, a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Go. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and the night was far from over. Danielle looked down at the red stain on her dress. It looked like a wound, and in a way it was. She turned and walked toward the restroom. She just needed a minute, just one quiet minute to breathe. She didn't know Victoria was already following her. The hallway behind the main tent was narrow, stone walls on both sides, dim lighting, a row of small lanterns flickering along the floor. It was meant to feel romantic. Right now, it felt like a trap. Danielle walked quickly. The wine stain on her dress was still wet. She could feel it cold against her stomach. She just needed to get to the restroom, rinse it out, collect herself, go back out there and survive the rest of this night for Chloe's sake. She didn't make it. "Where do you think you're going?" Victoria's voice came from behind her, sharp, close. Danielle stopped, turned around. Victoria was standing at the other end of the hallway, arms crossed, champagne gone. Her face wasn't wearing the fake smile anymore. This was the real Victoria, the one her friends only whispered about. "Back to the party," Danielle said. "After I clean up the mess you made." Victoria took a step forward. "Let me make something very clear to you. I don't know how you got in here. I don't know what story you told Chloe. But this is my son's wedding, my family's event. And people like you do not belong in this room." "People like me." "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean." Danielle felt her pulse climb, but she held her ground. "Chloe is my best friend. She has been since we were 15. I'm not going anywhere." Victoria laughed. Not a real laugh. A sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Best friend? You? Let me guess, she felt sorry for you, took you in like a stray, fed you, gave you clothes, and now you follow her around like a lost puppy, hoping some of her life rubs off on you." Danielle's hands curled into fists at her sides. "You don't know anything about us." "I know enough. I know your type. You people always find a way to sneak into places you weren't invited. You smile. You play nice. You sit at the table like you earned a seat. But we both know the truth." She stepped closer, close enough that Danielle could smell the champagne on her breath. "You didn't earn anything. You don't have anything. You're nothing." Danielle's voice dropped low, steady. "I'm more than you'll ever understand." That was the wrong thing to say. Or maybe it was exactly the right thing. Because something in Victoria's face shifted. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. "More? You think you're more?" Victoria's voice rose. "You're a black girl in a cheap dress at a wedding you weren't built for. Your mother probably cleaned houses for a living. Your father probably wasn't even in the picture. Am I wrong?" Danielle said nothing, but her eyes glistened. Victoria saw it, and she pressed harder. "That's what I thought. You don't even have the dignity to admit what you are. At least the servers know their place. You sit there pretending you're one of us, but you will never be one of us. Not in 1,000 years." A small sound escaped Danielle's throat. Not a word, just a breath that carried the weight of every insult she'd swallowed tonight. Victoria smiled. She smelled blood, and she went in for the kill. She reached out and grabbed Danielle's dress at the shoulder. Her fingers twisted into the fabric. Danielle tried to pull back. Too late. Victoria yanked, hard. The fabric tore, a loud, ugly rip that echoed through the hallway. The sleeve separated from the bodice. Danielle's left shoulder was completely exposed. She stumbled sideways. Her hip hit the stone wall, and as she stumbled, something swung out from under her neckline. A thin gold chain, and hanging from it, a ring. A wedding ring with a diamond that caught every flicker of lantern light in that hallway. Victoria didn't even notice it. She was too busy staring at Danielle like she'd just disciplined a misbehaving child. "Now you look exactly like what you are," Victoria said. "Trash. Get out of this building before I have security drag you out by your hair." Danielle pressed her back against the wall. Her torn dress hung off one shoulder, wine stain across her chest. Her body was shaking, not from cold, from the effort of not breaking apart. At the far end of the hallway, Grace Sullivan, the wedding coordinator, stood frozen. She had seen the last 30 seconds, the grab, the tear, the stumble. Her clipboard was trembling in her hands. 2 other guests had stepped into the hallway behind Victoria. One of them, a young woman in a green dress, had her phone out. The camera was recording. She didn't say a word. She just held it steady. Victoria didn't see any of them. She was already on the move. She walked back toward the reception tent, flagged down a venue security guard, a big man in a black polo, and pointed toward the hallway. "That woman back there. She's not a guest. She's been harassing me all evening. I want her removed. Now." The guard looked toward the hallway. He saw Danielle. Torn dress, wine stains, standing alone against the wall. She didn't look like a troublemaker, but Victoria was the mother of the groom, and the mother of the groom was giving an order. He walked over. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." Danielle looked at him. "I'm a guest. Call Chloe Bennett, the bride. She'll confirm it." "Ma'am, I've been asked to escort you out. Just call her. Please." The guard reached for his radio, but Victoria was right behind him. "Don't waste time. Just get her out. I'll take full responsibility." The guard hesitated, then nodded. "Ma'am, please come with me." Danielle looked past him, past Victoria, into the reception tent, where 200 people were eating and drinking and laughing, where her best friend was somewhere in a garden taking photos, completely unaware that any of this was happening. She looked down at her torn dress, at the wine stain that had dried into a dark red map across her stomach, at the ring hanging from her chain, swinging gently against her exposed collarbone. She picked up her clutch from the floor, straightened her back, and walked. Not because she accepted it, but because she knew something Victoria didn't. The guard walked Danielle through the foyer, past the coat check, past the flower arrangements, past a table of welcome cards that spelled out Tyler and Chloe in gold letters. Guests in the hallway stopped talking as she passed. They stared. They whispered. Some of them looked away, not because they didn't see what happened, because they didn't want to get involved. Danielle reached the front entrance. The evening air hit her bare shoulder. The sun was going down. The vineyard glowed orange and purple in the distance. Beautiful. Empty. She pulled out her phone. One call. It rang twice. "Elliot." Her voice was steady, barely. "How far are you?" A pause on the other end. "I need you here. Now." She hung up, slipped the phone back into her clutch, and stood there in the fading light, holding her torn dress together with one hand. 15 minutes. That's what he'd said. 15 minutes. She could hold on for 15 more minutes. 14 minutes later, a black Maybach Pullman rolled up the vineyard's gravel driveway. Slow. Quiet. The kind of car that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. The valet stepped forward, then stopped. He looked at the car, looked at the plates, looked at the car again. His hand dropped to his side. The rear door opened. Elliot Adams stepped out. Tall, lean, a tailored black suit that fit like it was stitched onto his body that morning. Silver cufflinks. A watch that cost more than the valet's annual salary. He moved like a man who had walked into 1,000 rooms and owned every single one of them. Behind him, 2 men followed. Reginald Moore, his personal attorney, and his chief of staff, both in dark suits, both carrying the expression of men who had already been briefed. Elliot scanned the entrance. His eyes found Danielle in 3 seconds. She was standing near the valet station, alone, holding her torn dress together with one hand, wine stain dried across her chest, her shoulder bare and bruised where the fabric had ripped away. Elliot stopped walking. For one moment, just one, something cracked behind his eyes. Not sadness. Something deeper. Something dangerous. The kind of quiet fury that doesn't scream. It calculates. He crossed the distance in 4 strides, took off his suit jacket without breaking eye contact with her, draped it over her shoulders. Both hands, gentle, like he was covering something sacred. He kissed her forehead, held it there for a beat. "Who did this?" His voice was low, calm, The kind of calm that makes the air around it go still. Danielle looked up at him. She didn't cry. She'd used up all her fight holding it together for the last hour. She just said one word. Victoria. Elliot straightened, buttoned his shirt cuff, and turned toward the building. The security guard from earlier stepped forward, hand raised. Sir, I'm going to need to know— Elliot didn't slow down. That woman you just escorted out is my wife, and the woman who put her hands on my wife is inside your venue, so I'd suggest you step aside. The guard's hand dropped. His face went white. He stepped aside. Elliot walked through the foyer, through the hallway, through the entrance of the main reception tent. Danielle was beside him, his jacket around her shoulders. Reginald and his chief of staff 2 steps behind. The tent was full. 200 guests. Music playing, glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off the white fabric ceiling. Then someone looked up. Then another. Then another. The laughter stopped. The music kept playing, but nobody was listening anymore. Every pair of eyes in that tent turned toward the entrance. Elliot Adams walked through the center of the room like he was walking through a boardroom he was about to shut down. Guests started pulling out phones, not to record, to Google. Fingers typing fast. Elliot Adams, Meridian Capital Group, founder and CEO. Net worth, $4.2 billion. Faces changed. Jaws dropped. Forks hit plates. A woman at table 3 put her hand over her mouth. Victoria was at the head table. She had a fresh glass of champagne. She was laughing with 2 women from her circle. She hadn't even noticed the room had gone silent. Then she looked up. She saw Danielle first, still in the torn dress, Elliot's jacket on her shoulders, walking toward her. And beside her, a man Victoria had never seen before. She frowned. What is this? I thought I told security. Elliot stopped 3 feet in front of her, close enough to see the champagne bubbles in her glass. Mrs. Caldwell. Victoria blinked. Do I know you? No, but you know my wife. He glanced at Danielle, then back at Victoria. You tore her dress off her body. You called her trash. You had her thrown out of this wedding. Victoria's smile vanished. Her eyes darted around the room. Every guest was watching. Every phone was out. She let out a nervous laugh. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. There are witnesses. There's video. And there's a torn dress on my wife's body right now. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Tyler rushed over from the other side of the tent. His face was red. His tie was loose. He looked at Elliot, then at Danielle, then at his mother. Mom, what did you do? Victoria stammered. I didn't know. Chloe came running in from the garden, veil still pinned, bouquet still in hand. She saw Danielle, the torn dress, the jacket, the wine stain. She dropped the bouquet. Danny. Her voice broke. Oh my God. Danny. She threw her arms around Danielle and held on, tears streaming down her face. Her white gown pressed against Elliot's black jacket. The entire room watched. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Victoria stood alone at the head table, champagne glass still in her hand. The room she had controlled all night had just slipped through her fingers like sand. And for the first time in her entire life, Victoria Caldwell had absolutely nothing to say. The silence lasted about 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. Then Victoria did what Victoria always does. She tried to spin it. Look, she said, forcing a laugh that came out thin and cracked. This has all been blown out of proportion. I didn't know she was anyone important. If I had known— Elliot cut her off. Not with volume, with precision. If you had known, that's what you just said. He took one step closer. So if she weren't my wife, if she were just a woman in a dress at a wedding, what you did would have been acceptable? Victoria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You ripped a woman's dress off her body. You called her trash. You had her thrown out of a building, and your defense is that you didn't know she was rich? The room was so quiet, you could hear the string quartet's bow case click shut in the corner. The musicians had stopped playing. Even they were watching. Victoria looked around the room for support, for a single friendly face, for someone, anyone, from her circle to step in and back her up. Nobody moved. Tyler stepped forward. His face was tight. His voice was shaking. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't shaking from fear. He was shaking from anger. Mom, Danielle is Chloe's best friend. She's been in Chloe's life since they were teenagers. That makes her family. My family. Tyler, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You assaulted a guest at my wedding, in front of 200 people, because you looked at her and decided she didn't belong. Victoria reached for his arm. He pulled away. Don't. That one word hit harder than anything Elliot had said. Victoria's hand hung in the air for a moment, then dropped to her side. Chloe was still holding Danielle. She pulled back just enough to look at Victoria. Her mascara was ruined. Her veil was sideways. She didn't care. You assaulted my best friend, Chloe said. Her voice was low and raw. At my wedding, the one day that was supposed to be mine, and you made it about your hate. She shook her head slowly. I will never forgive you for this. Ever. Victoria's face crumbled. Not into remorse, into panic. She could feel her world tilting. The room, the guests, her son, her new daughter-in-law. Everything she had built her identity around was cracking under her feet. Elliot already had his phone out. He'd made the call before he even entered the tent. Calm. Quiet. 3 sentences to the Napa County Sheriff's Department. Officer Dawson arrived in 18 minutes, 2 deputies with him. They came in through the side entrance. No sirens, no drama. Just 3 officers walking into a wedding reception like it happened every Saturday. Elliot's attorney, Reginald Moore, was already waiting for them. He had the cell phone video queued up on the tablet. The young woman in the green dress, the one who had recorded the hallway incident, had shared it within minutes of Elliot's arrival. She didn't even hesitate. The video was clear. 32 seconds of footage. Victoria grabbing the dress, the fabric ripping, Danielle stumbling, Victoria's voice saying every word. Crystal clear audio. Officer Dawson watched it twice, then looked at Victoria. Ma'am, I need to speak with you outside. Victoria straightened her spine, lifted her chin, put on the voice she used at charity galas and board meetings. Officer, I'm Victoria Caldwell. My family has donated extensively to the Police Benevolent Fund. I'm sure we can sort this out. Ma'am, outside, now. The voice left no room. Victoria's name-dropping bounced off Officer Dawson like rain off concrete. He'd been on the force for 22 years. He'd seen wealth try to buy its way out of consequences 100 times. It never worked. Not on his watch. Victoria was escorted out of the reception tent in front of every guest. No handcuffs. Not yet. But the image was enough. 2 deputies flanking her, her heels clicking on the stone floor, her head held high, but her hands trembling at her sides. Nobody from her circle followed. Nobody called out to her. Nobody said, wait, or there must be a mistake. They just watched her go. The tent was still for a long moment after she disappeared. Then Chloe wiped her eyes, straightened her veil, took a deep breath. This is still my wedding, she said. She looked at the DJ, nodded. The music started again. Danielle changed into a spare dress from the bridal suite, something simple, something that fit. Elliot stayed by her side the rest of the night. They danced, slowly, close, his hand on the small of her back, her head resting against his chest. The reception went on. The cake was cut, the bouquet was thrown. Guests laughed again. Not as loud as before, but real. Outside, in the back of a patrol car, Victoria Caldwell sat in silence, charged with simple assault and battery. The longest day of the year wasn't over yet, but for Victoria, the sun had already set. The video hit the internet before Victoria even made it to the police station. The young woman in the green dress, her name was Megan, posted it on social media that same night. No caption, no filter. Just 32 raw seconds of a wealthy white woman ripping a black woman's dress apart at a wedding and telling her to crawl back to where she came from. By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By noon the next day, 2 million. By the end of the week, 12 million people had watched Victoria Caldwell destroy her own life in half a minute. The hashtags came fast. Justice for Danielle, wedding assault, Caldwell exposed. They trended for 3 straight days. News outlets picked it up like wildfire. Local stations first, then national, then cable news, then international. The headlines wrote themselves. Wealthy socialite assaults black guest at son's wedding. Mother of the groom caught on video ripping woman's dress. Billionaire's wife humiliated at Napa wedding. Then her husband showed up. Every news segment played the same 32 seconds. Victoria's hand grabbing the fabric. The rip. Danielle stumbling. Victoria's words, clear, cold, unmistakable. Analysts broke it down frame by frame. Body language experts weighed in. Legal commentators debated charges. Social media turned Victoria Caldwell into the most hated woman in America overnight. And Victoria's world collapsed, one piece at a time. First, the Napa Valley Country Club. She'd been a member for 19 years. The board held an emergency meeting on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, her membership was revoked. A spokesperson released a single sentence. The club does not condone behavior that contradicts our values of dignity and respect. Victoria had hosted her annual charity luncheon there every spring. That luncheon was now permanently canceled. Next, the charity boards. Victoria sat on 3 of them: the Children's Arts Foundation, the Bay Area Women's Leadership Council, the Northern California Heritage Society. All 3 released statements within 48 hours. All 3 used the same word: separated. Victoria Caldwell had been separated from their organizations, effective immediately. Then came the friends. Or rather, the disappearance of friends. The women who had laughed at her jokes that night. The women who had stood behind her in the reception tent. The women who had sipped champagne while Danielle was escorted out. One by one, they vanished, blocked her calls, unfollowed her accounts, pretended they barely knew her. The same circle that had enabled Victoria for decades suddenly couldn't remember her name. That's how it works. Loyalty built on status disappears the moment the status does. Then the business took a hit. Caldwell and Pierce Holdings, the family's real estate and investment firm, had operated quietly for decades. Old money, old clients, the kind of business that ran on handshakes and golf course deals. But old money doesn't survive new media. 2 municipal contracts, one with the city of San Francisco, one with Marin County, announced formal reviews of their partnerships with Caldwell and Pierce. 3 private clients quietly pulled their portfolios. The firm's PR team scrambled to draft a response, but everything they wrote made it worse. Tyler finally stepped in. He released a public statement that took him 4 hours to write and 30 seconds to deliver. My mother's actions at my wedding do not represent my values, my wife's values, or the values of this family. Effective immediately, Victoria Caldwell has been removed from any advisory role in Caldwell and Pierce Holdings. I take full responsibility for ensuring this firm operates with integrity. It was the hardest thing Tyler had ever done, and the most necessary. The legal case moved fast. Napa County District Attorney filed formal charges within 10 days. Count 1, assault and battery. Count 2, hate crime enhancement under California Penal Code Section 422.55, a crime motivated by bias against the victim's race. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, 5 eyewitness statements, Grace Sullivan's written account, the server who confirmed Victoria deliberately caused the wine spill, and Danielle's torn dress, preserved and submitted as physical evidence. Victoria's attorney, a high-priced defense lawyer named Gerald Whitmore, pushed for a plea deal. Misdemeanor assault, community service, no jail time. Case closed quietly. Danielle and Elliot didn't push for a harsh sentence. They pushed for something else entirely. Elliot's foundation, the Adams Equity Initiative, announced a $5 million grant to organizations fighting racial discrimination in social and hospitality settings. The announcement came 3 days after the charges were filed. It dominated an entire news cycle. Danielle gave one interview, just one, a national morning show. She sat in a simple white blouse, no jewelry except the ring on her chain. She spoke calmly, clearly, without anger. "I wasn't targeted because I'm a billionaire's wife," she said. "I was targeted because I'm a black woman. Victoria looked at me and decided I didn't belong. That happens every single day to women who look like me. The only difference is that this time, there was a camera." The clip went viral on its own. Another 8 million views. Victoria rejected the plea deal. Her attorney advised against it. Her own son advised against it. But Victoria Caldwell had spent 56 years believing that her name, her money, and her connections could get her out of anything. She was wrong. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution played the video on the first morning. The jury watched it 3 times. One juror, a middle-aged woman in the back row, closed her eyes during the third viewing and shook her head. 5 witnesses testified: Grace Sullivan, Megan, the woman who recorded the video, 2 guests who were in the hallway, and the server who confirmed the wine spill was intentional. Victoria took the stand on day 3. Gerald Whitmore tried to paint her as a stressed mother who made a mistake under pressure. Victoria tried to be sympathetic, but under cross-examination, the prosecutor asked one question that ended her defense. "Mrs. Caldwell, if Danielle Adams had been a white woman in the same dress, would you have asked her to leave?" Victoria hesitated. 3 seconds. 4. 5. That's not what this was about. Answer the question, please." She never did. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They came back with a guilty verdict on both counts. The sentencing hearing was held the following week. The courtroom was packed. Media in the back rows, cameras outside. Victoria sat at the defense table in a navy suit. No champagne, no circle of friends, just Gerald Whitmore and a glass of water. The judge, Honorable Patricia Coleman, read the sentence. 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service to be completed at nonprofit organizations serving underserved communities, mandatory enrollment in a certified anti-discrimination counseling program, a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with Danielle Adams. Judge Coleman removed her glasses and looked directly at Victoria. "Mrs. Caldwell, wealth is not a license to dehumanize others. A wedding invitation does not come with a hierarchy of human worth. What you did was not a mistake. It was a choice, and choices have consequences." Victoria stared straight ahead. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were dry. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just sat there, perfectly still, while the world she had built crumbled around her in a courtroom she couldn't buy her way out of. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Victoria's attorney said, "No comment," 14 times. Victoria got into a black SUV and disappeared behind tinted windows. The public reaction was swift. Most people felt the sentence was fair, not too harsh, not too soft, just right. The kind of justice that doesn't destroy a person, but makes sure they feel the weight of what they did. Comment sections lit up for days, millions of people sharing their own stories, their own moments of being told they didn't belong, their own Victorias. Danielle didn't comment on the verdict. She didn't need to. The video had already said everything. 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning in December, Danielle Adams walked into a small brunch spot in downtown Oakland, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and coffee that tastes like someone's grandmother made it. No valet, no champagne towers, no string quartets, just good food and a wobbly table by the window. Chloe was already sitting there, hair up, oversized sweater, a half-eaten croissant in front of her. Danielle sat down across from her. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. They just smiled, the kind of smile that carries 20 years of history without saying a word. "You look good," Chloe said. "You look tired," Danielle said. "Tyler snores. Elliot snores louder." They both laughed. Easy, natural, like nothing had ever happened. Like no dress had ever been torn. Like no hallway had ever echoed with words designed to make a woman feel less than human. But something had happened, and it had changed things. Not between them, their bond was older than any of it, but around them. Chloe hadn't spoken to Victoria since the trial. Tyler supported that decision completely. He called his mother once a month, short conversations, surface level. He loved her because she was his mother. But he no longer trusted her. And trust, once broken at that level, doesn't come back easy. Victoria completed her community service. 200 hours at a family resource center in East Oakland. She showed up on time. She did what was asked. She didn't complain, at least not publicly. But whether she actually changed? That's a harder question. A volunteer at the center told a reporter that Victoria was overheard on her last day saying, "Thank God that's over. I've never spent so much time in a place like this in my life." So, draw your own conclusions. Some people learn. Some people just serve their hours and go home. Danielle didn't spend much time thinking about Victoria anymore. She had other things on her mind. After the trial, something shifted. Invitations started coming in, speaking requests, panel discussions, podcast interviews. Organizations focused on racial equity and social justice reached out, asking Danielle to share her story. She said yes. Not because of the video, not because of Elliot's name, but because she'd lived the experience that millions of black women live every single day. Being looked at and immediately categorized. Being told, without words or with them, that you don't belong. She spoke at a women's leadership conference in Atlanta. She gave the keynote at a hospitality industry summit in Chicago. She partnered with 2 nonprofits focused on bias training in high-end service environments. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because the platform landed in her lap, and she wasn't the kind of person who wastes an opportunity to make something better. Elliot supported every bit of it. Quietly, from the background, the way he always did. One evening, they were home. Elliot was reading on the couch. Danielle was curled up beside him, scrolling through emails on her phone. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists when 2 people are completely comfortable in each other's silence. "Hey," Elliot said. She looked up. "You okay?" She thought about it. Really thought about it. "Yeah," she said. "I was okay the moment you put your jacket on my shoulders." He didn't say anything. He just reached over and held her hand. Sometimes the biggest moments don't need big words. So here's the thing I want to leave you with. The lesson of this story is not that Danielle needed a billionaire husband to get justice. The lesson is that she shouldn't have needed one at all. Dignity is not something you earn with a net worth. It's not something that shows up in a Maybach. It's something every single person is owed the moment they walk into a room. Any room. No exceptions. The real question isn't whether people like Victoria exist. We all know they do. The real question is, what do we do when we see it happen? Do we sit there like those 200 guests and pretend we didn't hear it? Do we look away because it's not our problem? Or do we open our mouths and say something? So here's what I want to know. Have you ever been in a room where someone decided you didn't belong? Not because of anything you did, but because of how you looked? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, anything, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because these stories need to be told. And you being here means they will.